So yeah, we've got our candidates here. So what I'm going to do is just ask each of you to introduce yourselves. So Hamish, do you want to start?
Sure, just a couple of minutes intro.
Yeah, just a wee intro, just so everyone knows who you are.
Hello, can you hear me through the microphone?
Yes.
Great. Well, good afternoon. My name is Hamish Maxwell, and I'm delighted to be Labour's Westminster candidate in the beautiful Argyll, Butte and South Agava. I spent much of my childhood in social housing, followed by law school, which I paid for partly by labouring on building sites. I feel a really strong personal connection with the constituency. I used to be an officer in the Royal Navy based at Fas Lane. I spent loads and loads of time getting to know the amazing communities in the wider area. And actually, I feel like I owe this place an awful lot, because submarining can be really, really hard on a person. And coming back from sea, living somewhere so beautiful with such amazing communities was really, really good for me at a time that I needed that. So that's one of the reasons I'm standing here, because I feel like I owe the place an awful lot. And then after the Navy, I got a scholarship to an MBA and now work in Scottish asset management. And helping to guide me have been my mother, who used to be a teaching assistant, my father, who used to be a journalist, and my wonderful wife, who's an amazing mother and a HR professional. I want everyone in this constituency to have the opportunity for a better future. So that means I want stronger public services supported by a stronger and growing economy. I think Labour is the party that can deliver change, and I believe Labour is the most progressive party on the ballot paper, and I'm very keen to discuss that this evening. In terms of how life has shaped my views on LGBTQ issues, I think first of all I'll just state very clearly for the record that I do support the LGBT community. I stand against all forms of hatred, bigotry and prejudice, and I stand for dignity, equality and respect for everyone. And that would be my abiding mission as a Member of Parliament, to make sure that no one felt marginalised and everybody had a voice. I suppose my perspectives come from a lot earlier in life. My mum had gay friends when I was much younger, and growing up in the 90s, that wasn't necessarily typical, but it was in our household. And these people were effectively uncles to me, and I understood a bit about their life. And I learned more when I went to university at Brighton, which is a very liberal place compared to other parts of the country. And I attended lots and lots of Pride events, which I supported. And I was at my most recent Pride event on Saturday in Edinburgh. And then nearly 10 years ago, I went to my first gay wedding, and I went to my most recent a few weeks ago. And those, I think, I feel proud that that's part of our society today, but I think we've got a long way to go still. There are topics we can discuss where we can make progress, such as, there's numerous, such as banning conversion therapy, a new HIV action plan, making crimes, hate crimes against the LGBT community, aggravated crimes, which demonstrate the law will take them much more seriously. But I know we're going to get into some more about the policy throughout the next hour. So thank you very much for having me and for putting on this important event.
Thank you very much, Hamish. And we'll move straight on to Alan. We'll just go along the row.
You way back if I'm going on too long.
No, we'll just switch your mic.
Give me 10 seconds as well. Okay, good afternoon, and want to thank Oban Pride very much for organising this afternoon's hustings, and thank you all for coming along to hear us state our case and ask some questions. I look forward to a very interesting discussion later on. My name's Alan Reid. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for this new constituency of Argyll, Butte and South Lochaber. I was the Member of Parliament for the former constituency of Argyll and Butte for 14 years, from 2001 to 2015, so I know the constituency very well. When I was the MP, I made it my purpose to give everybody in the constituency the chance to contact me, to give me their views. I held regular surgeries in all the towns around the year, and during the summer I went off on a summer tour which involved stops on all the towns and villages in the constituency, holding surgeries in each of those, so that I got to know the views of people throughout the constituency. If you re-elect me to Parliament, then I will adopt the same way of working again. I know the constituency very well, and I know many people in it. Turning now to Liberal Democrat principles, it's among the basic principles of the Liberal Democrats are to build a free society where everybody's rights and liberties are protected. Everybody should be able to live their lives as who they are, free to pursue their dreams, fulfill their potential, safe in the knowledge that their fundamental rights will be protected. We champion the freedom, dignity and well-being of every individual, and we will combat all forms of prejudice and discrimination. When I was the MP, I was pleased to vote for the progressive Acts of Parliament that went through the original Gender Recognition Act, civil partnerships, same-sex marriage, and I will continue to vote for progressive causes. I won't go into detail now because I'm sure that will come up in the questions later on, and I'm certainly looking forward to an interesting discussion tonight.
Thank you very much, Alan. And we'll go over to Brendan next.
Thank you very much. My name is Brendan O'Hara, and I have been the Member of Parliament for Argyll and Bute since 2015. Thank you to Oban Pride for organising. Well, I'm slightly nervous sitting in this seat because the last time I sat this close to Phil, he covered me in glitter.
I think you'll find that was crystal, not
Oh, was it?
Phil.
Oh, was it? I do apologise. I thought it was yourself, but I was last time I was at an Oban Pride event. I was covered in glitter back in 2019, but it's superb, and I'm so delighted that from that original idea that you had, that you've grown the way that you have and become an integral part of this town, and I'm honoured to be here. I know the event is on the 30th. If I'm in Scotland, I will be here. If I'm not, I will send my apologies. But if you were remotely interested in what I had to say, you could come along to Bute Pride on August the 10th, where I have confirmed that I will be speaking at Bute Pride. I hope you know, and I'm sure you do know, that in me and as your Member of Parliament, I have been a staunch ally of your community. And I have and I will continue to call out, condemn and oppose all forms of discrimination and bigotry when and where I see it. And I'm proud to be an SNP member. And I'm particularly proud of the SNP government, who have been in many ways trailblazing in the UK for many years on these issues. And I think the SNP has a proven track record of advancing and championing LGBTQ plus rights while in government. And I know from having spoken to John and his ministers that they will continue to work to build that fairer and more equal society that we all aspire to be part of. But what I would say in terms of independence, with the powers of independence, we would have the ability to improve equality both in law and in society, and we'd have the ability to champion rights internationally as well. And with independence, we wouldn't have to go to Westminster to beg them not to use a Section 35 order to stop our progressive policies that were agreed by our democratically elected Scottish Parliament with support from every single political party in that Parliament. We wouldn't have to go and beg them not to overturn those progressive policies. We know they did it with the Gender Recognition Act, and who knows when they will next do it, when they believe that Scotland is becoming too progressive or too equal or too fair a society. And I know these are issues that we will talk about and we'll discuss at length, but let me put on record that as far as I'm concerned, nobody's identity should be up for debate. Nobody's identity should be a political football, and nobody's rights should be diminished or compromised for cheap political gain.
Thank you very much, Brendan. a big thank you to all three of you for attending today and joining us for our hustings. It's great to have you all with us, and great to have so many of you joining us as well. And we are live on Facebook as well, so if you do have questions in the studio, just raise your hands. We do have some questions already that people have pre-sent us, and if you do have questions on Facebook, you can pop them in the comments. If we don't get through all the questions, because I highly doubt we will, because there'll be lots, then we will send them off to the candidates that are here to give them time to respond to them, and then we can put them out on our socials and by email if anyone is interested in those questions. So we'll go on to the first question that we're going to ask for this afternoon, which is, if elected, how will you ensure every LGBTQ plus person can be their authentic selves? Who shall we start with? We'll start with Hamish again.
Thanks for a great opening question. So I was looking at this question and the one that follows, and this one it sort of refers to you as the individual, the next one refers to party. So I've been thinking about question one more in the personal sense, and my own beliefs and my own reflections and how I think about my role in this discussion. So as a person, very clearly stating again on record that I stand absolutely against hatred, bigotry and prejudice. I think the world would be a much better place if some people spent less time thinking about telling other people how to live their lives and focus on their own happiness, and that everybody got to be their authentic selves. That is my essential guiding principle. And I think if I share that with you and underline that with you, and I recognise similar across and other candidates here this evening, I'm not going to treat this as a political point scoring exercise. It's about those sort of guiding principles and helping you understand that will always be my head mark. And then it's got me thinking about how I as a person can help in that discussion in the context of LGBTQ. And it's not the first time I've thought about it. Throughout my life, as I've made friends with people from such communities, I have reflected on my own role as a friend and ally to those people. And I've written down a few of the things that over time have developed in my mind, but I'm also still in that learning phase as well. Because to reiterate, it's worth making the point that as a straight white man, this isn't about lived experiences firsthand, it's about learning from other people. But I think advocating for acceptance, so as an individual but as an elected official, making sure that I'm speaking out for respect and acceptance and against bigotry, because bigotry is often perpetrated by bullies, and bullies can be scary. We have to be brave. I would feel that I'd have to be brave to stand up against that sort of thing. I'm really interested in understanding bias recognition and this idea of conscious and unconscious biases, and helping people recognise that very often it's the unconscious things they do that can lead to negative forms of behaviour. And also understanding that biases can be learned and unlearned as well. So there's an education piece here that society is going on, and individuals are at different stages of this journey. I see positive progress so far, but I think there's more that can be done. I think there's something really important in the idea of active listening as well, and avoiding assumptions. This is about learning, again, as my own learning. Listen to what people are saying and be attuned to thoughts and feelings. Put my own perspectives aside and try to learn from other people, and recognise that it's not about categories necessarily, it's about people expressing who they are, and why as an elected official I have a deep, important responsibility, a commitment to helping them be who they are, and to defend people from prejudice, from hatred, from experiencing trauma. So there's lots in there about educating myself, helping educate other people, and continuing to express that I am an ally of this cause, and that I will be brave enough to stand up against bullies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamish. And the same question to Alan.
Thank you, Phil. As I said in the opening statement, we start from the basic principle that everybody should be able to live their lives as who they are, free to pursue their dreams and fulfil their potential. Government clearly has a role to play to protect people from discrimination, and that's why we would keep the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act, and we would resist any attempts to remove people's human rights. We would, for example, resist any attempt to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. And we would extend those rights as well, for example, by legislating to give legal recognition to non-binary identities. But as well as legislation, governments and elected representatives also have an important role to play in setting the agenda. And we have to grasp that role by making it clear time after time that discrimination against LGBTQ plus people is wrong. The government and elected representatives should openly celebrate the diversity in the country and ensure that it's better reflected throughout public life. We need to do much more to promote equality and to tackle institutional biases wherever that exists, because public life should represent our diverse society. And within the constituency, I would attend Pride events, not making a commitment to attend them all, because in this vast constituency you can't be in two places on the same day, but I would certainly give a commitment to attend several Pride events. And so I think that's important. It's part of my role of making it clear that all diverse forms of identity are acceptable and should be treated equally within society. I think that if you apply the fundamental principles of openness, transparency and accountability to tackle institutional biases where we find it and to promote equality.
Thank you very much, Alan. And the same question to Brendan.
I think that certainly for people of my age and my generation, the distance we have travelled in the last 20, 30, 40 years has been quite remarkable. And I think that society should be congratulated for how far it's come. And we should look at the people who made that happen. That's never been easy. They have fought every single step of the way to make that happen. So where we are now, if we look over our shoulder, we've got so many people to thank and so many people who deserve to be honoured for the role that they've played in getting us as far as we are. So although we are standing in many ways on the shoulders of giants, we've still got so far to travel. And in that journey, we cannot leave any community behind. We cannot leave any community behind because it's suddenly become too difficult or too challenging, or it might divide public opinion once again. If there's a road to go down, then we have to take it. But if it's the easy road to go down, then it probably means we're on the wrong road. So we've got to move forward together. We've got to make sure that everybody comes with us on that road and we leave no one behind. And I think that what your elected representative has to do is exactly as Hamish said. You have to be brave. You have to stand up. You have to be counted. You have to make sure that no matter how difficult the issue is, that you're on the side of doing the right thing. And I think that for too long, too many people have found these issues too difficult to deal with, or it's easier to say nothing. And that's why, as the MP for Argyll and Bute, with these issues, I mean, let's be honest, 95%, if not more, of these day-to-day issues are devolved. It's devolved to the Scottish Parliament, and I'm incredibly grateful, as I said, that we have the Scottish Government that we do have. But when it comes to Westminster using their power to thwart what we're trying to do, then that's where you really do need your representative to stand up and defend the rights of the Scottish Parliament to do what the Scottish Parliament and therefore the Scottish people have asked it to do. And that's where the role of the Member of Parliament comes in, and that is to say to Westminster, you're not getting away with using your Section 35 order to tell us that we can't do something. When the Scottish people and the Scottish Parliament say that they want the Gender Recognition Act passed, then who are Westminster to say, no, you're not getting it passed? And we have hit that wall at the moment. So we need to be brave, we need to speak out, and I think as a politician we have to do that, but I think as a community, I reiterate, we've got a distance still to travel, and we can only travel that distance together, and we cannot allow groups to be hived off and marginalised and be forgotten about because somehow it's too difficult to take them with us. We do that, we fail everybody.
Thank you very much, Brendan. As Oban Pride, not only do we organise our annual Pride event, we do regular social events, we do lots of peer support work, but we do a lot of work in schools as well, and with young people and with the LGBTQ plus network Argyll and Bute. So as we all know, or we hopefully all know, LGBTQ plus inclusive education is now a requirement in all Scottish schools. What is your opinion of this for the people of Argyll, Bute and South Loch Arbor? Yes, a wee follow-up question for you. So they didn't get set in that one. Who are you starting with, Alan? Anna.
Yes, Hamish pointing out the advantage of new technology. At some point your battery will go, Hamish.
You see that with such malice. Have you stolen my charger?
Right, sorry, what was the question again?
That's quite alright. So LGBTQ plus inclusive education is now a requirement for all Scottish schools. What is your opinion of this for the people of Argyll, Bute and South Loch Arbor?
Oh, I certainly agree with that. And I mean, as Brendan said, most of these 90% of the local services are devolved, so we can't make any commitment to from Westminster. But I definitely support that, and I would urge everybody else to do so. I would urge that policies like that to be supported by all those who do have the power to implement them.
Thank you, Alan. And Brendan?
But I know from my own school days, which admittedly were yesterday, but that's where bigotry and prejudice take hold. If allowed to go unchallenged, then the language of the playground becomes the language of the workplace. It becomes the language of the home. And I think that we've got to be vigilant, and we've got to be absolutely clear that our schools cannot be that breeding ground for bigotry and intolerance of any sort. So I think that an inclusive education policy, who could possibly argue against it? I think that what we are aiming to do is to have young adults of today being the responsible parents of tomorrow, and so that all of this, that language that I grew up with in the 60s and the 70s, and all of that sort of cheap portrayal of communities that became so commonplace and acceptable in the 60s and the 70s and even later, that it's now no longer acceptable, and people hopefully will look back and think, how was that even considered funny? So we've got a lot to do, but I think if we get it into schools and we challenge schools and we change the thinking and the language, then long term I think we will reap the benefits of it.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And Hamish?
Yeah, sure. I think this question gets to the heart of what is the point of our education system? What is the point of our schools? And it is to help produce the adults of the future that will reflect the society that we want it to reflect. And so I think the idea of denying this form of education, I think, would be stymieing our ability to help create the society that we want. it also raises the question, well, to deny that LGBTQ education in school, what's the assumption that a person becomes gay when they're an adult? Well, no, of course not. It's about helping someone understand who they are as they go through the journey of life. And I'm reminded of my experience at school where the agenda of what was called sex education was much, much more narrow. And a friend of ours who came out later on to us, we reflect afterwards that we just weren't equipped with the language to help our friend. And I think there's a big shortcoming there. But then my younger siblings, as they've gone through school, the language matured and developed, and some of their friends felt much more supported. It wasn't for a lack of a willing on my part or our friends' part, we just weren't equipped with the learning. So I absolutely do support, as other candidates do up here, LGBTQ education in schools, because again, what's the point of our education system? We're trying to create a society that reflects our values. So yeah, absolutely support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish. Can I ask also where the funding would come from for this, the education, as we don't appear to have very much at the moment? Brand?
Again, education has completely devolved, and we can get into the shrinking block grant from Westminster and the ever lessening pot in which they have to choose from. But as far as I'm aware, the Scottish Government have committed to this. Finding the funding is it's a job for Scottish ministers to find where that funding comes from in that shrinking pot. But I think accepting the principle of it and supporting it as a step forward, I think what we need to be doing is we need to somehow, well, I would say get more money out of Westminster, but let's rephrase that. I think somehow we've got to get out of Westminster, and we've got to start growing an economy back inside the European Union, because unless you can do that, then we are in an ever diminishing pot, and that's a much wider issue than just the funding for this. But I think it's a crucial issue, because I think when you follow or join the dots, I think it all comes back to a shrinking economy of a country which has cut itself off from its biggest trading partner and is dying as a result of it.
Can I ask the same question of yourself, Hamish?
Yeah, I mean, so clearly the devolution aspect of the answer won't change. This is it's a matter for ministers in Scotland to find the budget in this country, but it does raise questions about the broader economy. And I would agree that both the Scottish and the broader UK economy has been languishing recently. And I think there's a number of different factors at play here, but I think Labour's policy is clear on the fact that we are absolutely focused on growing the British economy, growing the economy in Scotland in a way that will support stronger public services in the future. I would consider, if Labour is lucky enough to be elected in this Westminster election and the next Holyrood election, we would view the austerity that we'd inherit as the low watermark. Everything that we do from then would be intended to build upon that in terms of economic growth and in terms of public funding. Labour, for the UK manifesto, has set out, we've done our very best to be as clear as possible at the back of the manifesto, exactly where our initial extra funding is coming from for a range of different measures, including schools. Admittedly, that's the UK version. But that will be reflected also in our Holyrood manifesto in a couple of years' time. But the point I'd like to make is we absolutely would view what we inherit, if lucky enough to be elected, as the low watermark, and our intention would be to grow that.
Thank you. Alan?
Yes, I mean, the normal course of events is for economies to grow. I mean, our economy has suffered in recent years. We had the self-inflicted Brexit, which has damaged our economy. We also had the out-of-the-blue COVID pandemic, which has damaged the economy. So recent years have not been normal. But with a sensible government in place, and obviously none of us can predict the future, but I mean, a pandemic like COVID was a once-in-a-century event. Spanish flu, 1918 being the previous one. So one would hope it would be a century before we suffer anything like that again. So the point I'm really making is that the normal course of events is for economies to grow, and then governments then have the choice of what they want to do with that economic growth. And one of the elements I would want to see being used by that economic growth would be improved education and LGBTQ plus issues in our schools. So that's certainly what I would hope the Scottish ministers would use economic growth, one of the things they would spend the money on.
Thank you. How does your party already, or how does your party intend to protect and improve trans rights and the Gender Recognition Act? A big conversation that's happening throughout the UK and through other places in the world at the moment as well. So how does your party already or intend to protect and improve trans rights and the Gender Recognition Act? And we'll start with Brendan this time.
As I've said a number of times already, we are in a situation where the democratic wishes of our Parliament, which were the GRA, had the support of members of every political party. It passed with a huge majority. It went through line by line scrutiny by the Scottish Parliament, but it was stopped by Westminster. Westminster has the power to stop an act of our Parliament, and that is the greatest weakness that we have. When do they use it next? At what issue do they say next, no, we don't agree, it isn't happening? And I think that what we're seeing with Westminster's behaviour at the moment is the weaponising of an issue for narrow political gain, and it's absolutely hideous. I think if you've read the bill, if you look at what the bill was intended to do, it was moderate, it was proportionate, it set out to do something which would destigmatise and help an already vulnerable and marginalised group. That's all it was. It was taking away a level that they had to jump through to get this recognition. But it was taken by elements who wanted to create disharmony and discord, and was weaponised, and it's become, I think, one of the most shameful episodes in my political life. I don't think I've ever seen a political debate degenerate so quickly into what you could only describe as armed camps, where there's no room for discussion, there's no nuance, there is nothing. You pick a side, you pick a cudgel, and you go for it. And it is hideous. And so while all this is going on, while all of these people are playing out this war on social media and elsewhere, you have a vulnerable, marginalised community at the centre of this, who everybody has forgotten about, whose interests are secondary to all of this. As long as these people get to have their fight, this weaponisation of this issue, I think, has been utterly shameful, and it makes me embarrassed. Not many things make me embarrassed to be Scottish, but I think that our behaviour and how we portrayed ourselves to the world over this has been deeply, deeply disgraceful. And I hope the Scottish Government continue to argue for the GRA. The Constitution says, that the issue is dead, essentially. But I think, as a principle, we should continue it. And those who are concerned about it, I would urge you, read the legislation, because 99% of what you've been told is in that legislation is not there. As I said, it's moderate, it's proportionate, and it sets out to do something to help a vulnerable community. And don't be fooled by what you're being told on social media. because it's not the case.
You hear?
How's the same for you, please, Alan?
Oh, there are two gender recognition acts. There's the original Gender Recognition Act, which was passed at Westminster about 20 years ago and is still in force. And there is the Gender Recognition Act that was passed by the Scottish Parliament and, as Brendan has said, is in legislation terms dead. But it can be revived again. I think it was quite disgraceful of the Tory Secretary of State to use the Section 35 powers. The Act was passed by the Scottish Parliament. It was clearly based on devolved powers. So whether the Secretary of State for Scotland agreed with it or disagreed with it, a belief in democracy would have told him that he should just allow it to pass and he shouldn't veto it. That's what devolution to the Scottish Parliament was all about. It does look as if the Tories are on the way out, and so I think there's nothing to stop the Scottish Parliament passing the same act again and a Secretary of State in the next government allowing it to go through, not using the Section 35 powers. I was in, as I said earlier, I was an MP when the original Gender Recognition Act was passed. It was progressive in its time, but 20 years have passed, and like much legislation, it's time for it to be reviewed. So in terms of strengthening it, I would like to see non-binary identities recognised in law. I would also like to see the removal of the spousal veto. Now that same-sex marriage is firmly established in law, I see no logic in maintaining the spousal veto. When the original Gender Recognition Act was passed, same-sex marriage was not legal, so there was a certain logic 20 years ago in the spousal veto, but that logic no longer exists because the law quite rightly recognises same-sex marriages, so there's no longer any logical reason for the spousal veto, so I think it should be removed.
And Hamish?
So in the first question, I set out sort of what I believe and what I stand for, and this is about the party more broadly. So I'll just underline that Labour stands for equality, respect and dignity for all individuals, and the party was founded to help marginalised people who are experiencing oppression in different forms over the years, but whatever it's manifesting itself in, that is the purpose of the party. That everybody has the opportunity for a better future, and that again, that guides the party. I mentioned what guides me. That does guide our party in our policies, in our campaigning, and our legislative action. Labour wants people across the country, trans people, to feel treated fairly. And when the last Labour government passed the Act, which Alan referred to in 2004, and again the 2010 Equality Act, we did break new political ground. And I'm proud of that progress. And I think that if you see it as a journey, it's one we do need to iterate. Alan's quite right that the next stage is within our power. Now is the time to be discussing how we improve upon the work already done. Labour recognises that the existing legislation does need to be reformed. It is intrusive, it is outdated, and it does need reform. And the party did support the bill in the Scottish Parliament recently. We did engage with it. We worked with the other parties, and that's something I think everyone involved with that should rightly be proud. Unfortunately, the Conservative candidate isn't here to sort of defend that party's position when it came to intervening from Westminster. For me, this is a question of, Brendan would make the case that this justifies an independence debate. My argument is that this justifies standing up for devolution and making it work properly. This is quite rightly an issue for Scotland to consider in this country, and I would like to see that bill, that Act, successfully passed. Labour would work with the Scottish Government if we are elected. So there has been a breakdown of relationship between the governing party in Westminster and the governing party in Holyrood. And neither of the two parties, make a secret of that. That has broken down. And I cannot account for the Conservative Party's actions. I don't think that's right at all. But Labour has made it very, very clear we would want a constructive relationship with the party in Holyrood. And I would absolutely not anticipate any form of obstruction, far from it. The party does support reforming the existing legislation. If we look at what in its current form, it can be humiliating, it can be painful. There are far too many difficult steps. The Scottish Party has argued against medicalisation of the process, and that's my view, and that's the party's view as well.
Thank you very much, Hamish. I am keeping an eye on the time. So we're going to do question 3, if we can do question 3 quite quickly, because I feel question 4 will need a lot more discussion. So our third question is, if elected, how will you and your party improve health and social care services, especially for LGBTQ plus people, and especially in rural areas like Oban and Argyll and Bute?
We'll go to Hamish again for that, please.
Labour was proud to found the NHS in the 1940s. Labour was proud to rescue the NHS in 1997, and Labour fully intends, if elected, to rescue the NHS in 2024. That's one of the founding principles of that service is universal, free for everyone, and absolutely not discriminatory. And it's one of the reasons I am standing as a candidate. I'm absolutely appalled with what's been going on with the NHS. Across the country, the health service is on its knees. 1 in 7 people in Scotland on a waiting list, 1 in 9 nurses wanting to quit, 3.5 times more people on extra long waiting lists. And compounding that, the evidence is very, very clear that LGBTQ people are disproportionately worse off within that system. It is compelling and consistent evidence that I think, starting off, that's what we need to recognise to begin with. And it's totally and utterly unacceptable. So a raft of surveys, including hundreds of thousands of people, talk about 40% of people, LGBTQ people were described having a negative experience because of their gender. Over half said they tried to access mental health services and couldn't. 30% said they left the system because they felt embarrassed. Nearly 20% of GPs weren't supportive. So the evidence is compelling and consistent that we do need to take action on here. And I think just shining a light on the problem to begin with is important. So Labour will get to work right from the start on the NHS, which is going to take investment. And again, for more detail, look in our manifesto to see where funding for that's going to come. But it will also, the Westminster funding we've found, will also help to improve the picture in Scotland with 160,000 more appointments in the Scottish NHS. And there's also going to be more investment into mental health as well. And specifically, when it comes to LGBTQ communities, again, it's about highlighting the disproportionate poor healthcare that those communities are experiencing. And it's about expanding and investing in their access to care, whether that be gender identity, whether that be mental health. And also the broader picture of legislating to make sure that healthcare absolutely is paid for by general taxation and is universal and is not discriminatory. That is right at the heart of the purpose of the Labour Party, and that's what I'll fight for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish.
Well, health and social care are both devolved to the Scottish Government and Parliament, so we couldn't make any changes directly from Westminster. However, the NHS needs, and social care, both need a lot more money injected. What I find that talking to people on the doorstep is that the NHS is great if you have a life-threatening condition. Talk to many people who are full of praise for the way their condition, the threat to their lives was found early, detected early, and they were treated quickly and with great skill and received great nursing care. However, the NHS is clearly struggling if you have a serious but not life-threatening condition where the waiting lists are growing and growing.
So we definitely need, that's the case in both Scotland and in the rest of the UK. So we need to get much more money into the NHS. In our manifesto, we have several ballot proposals for tax increases on big companies. Going to reverse the Conservatives' tax breaks for the banks. We would triple digital services tax. That's a tax on the social media and the tech giants. We would have a windfall tax on the profits of the big oil and gas companies, taxes on private flights, and there's a whole list of tax proposals that we've got there, mainly aimed at the wealthy and big companies. Now, in England, where Westminster runs the health service, we would spend a great deal of that money on the NHS and social care. But because of the Barnett formula, the Scottish Government will get its share of that money. The Scottish Government can spend it on any topic they want, but I think the public pressure would be to spend it on the NHS and social care. And I actually think there's little doubt that the Scottish Government would spend the money there. So that's how we would get more money into the health service. Here in our Guyland Butte, as has been said, we've seen a centralisation of many services to Glasgow and Paisley. So we need to bring services back to the Lorne and the Isles Hospital here in Oban and to other local hospitals. The local health and social care services are delivered by the Argyll Butte Health and Social Care Partnership. So if I was elected with the MP, what I would undertake to do would be have an early meeting with yourselves to find out just exactly what concerns you do have about these services, and then I would take the matter up with the HSCP to try to get things done. But if the Liberal Democrats are in government, this would be against the backdrop of increasing spending on the NHS, so I believe that we can achieve a great deal.
Thank you, Alan. Brendan?
Thank you very much. I think particularly in rural areas, the LGBTQ plus community know the pressure that health and social care is under, and I think there's no sign that it's going to get any better. I think creeping privatisation post-July is going to put even more pressure on services that the community needs. There are support out there. There's a fantastic organisations, in fact when I was here at Oban Pride, I met with Waverley Care, and I think Waverley Care have been absolutely brilliant. And what I found so good about them is they know the local community. They know what it is to work in rural Scotland. They understand the needs. On an individual basis, the needs might be the same as if you're in Glasgow or Edinburgh, but the community is so widespread and so different, and the feelings of isolation that people experience in Argyll and Butte and other areas like this is so intense that it really does need an organisation like Waverley Care who can understand that and can respond to the need of that. So there is no doubt that it needs to be better funded. There's absolutely no doubt that that level of care has to be improved. But I think with organisations who are already here, we have a very good starting point of which we can do it.
Thank you, Brendan. We are going to squeeze in the final question. We're starting a little bit late. And this is a very important question. It's been in the news within the last year, and it's a big topic that we discuss at Oban Pride, and was raised a lot at Edinburgh Pride over the weekend, as well as other prides. As most people will know, conversion therapy practices are still legal in the UK and still practiced in the UK. Many people who have been through this and many people that know about these practices describe these as torture, which, in our opinion, they are. How does your party intend to use the conversion practices consultation to bring in legislation to protect people from conversion practices and putting a ban to conversion practices.
We'll go for Alan.
Well, as you said, Phil, I mean, conversion therapies and practices are absolutely abhorrent, and our approach is quite simple. We would pass an Act of Parliament banning all forms of conversion therapies and practices in England. That's where Westminster's power extends so far as this topic is, and that would end it in England. I would hope the Scottish Parliament will pass a similar act. It's within the Scottish Parliament's remit, and I think they probably will. I think that's the way that they are going, and I would certainly support them in that.
Thank you. Hamish?
I totally agree with the premise of the question, which is that conversion therapy is utterly wicked. I stand firmly against it. It needs to be banned as soon as humanly possible. Not only is it a form of torture, but it's scientifically debunked, so honestly, what on earth is going on? The government in Westminster had signalled that it intended to legislate on this, and we've seen no action on that. If elected, the Labour Party would address this. We would legislate to ban conversion therapy. But I think there's also an advocacy point here, because I think if broader society was aware of the extent that these practices are still going on, I think more people would be angrier about it. So I think there's an education piece to do as well. I think among all the noise and chaos of government at the minute, this very, very important issue, which otherwise might have been addressed, A, hasn't been discussed enough, and B, hasn't been banned. So yeah, that's my position. That's my party's position.
Thank you. Brendan?
I think that to have our First Minister on Saturday at a Pride March holding a banner to end conversion therapy or conversion practices should give us all enormous hope that change is coming. It's an abhorrent practice. It's deeply, deeply harmful. And I would go as far as to say it is an absolute invasion of an individual's basic human rights. To do what they are planning to do and to continue doing, what has been done in the past in the name of science is astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing, and I know that the Scottish Government are absolutely committed to tackling this, and I'm certain they will. I wouldn't imagine the First Minister would stand behind that banner if he was in any doubt as to the direction of travel of his government, and he has my 100% support in doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are pretty much out of time. I know people probably have more questions, but as I said at the start, do send them through to us at Oban Pride, at obanpride@gmail.com. We will then pass them on to the candidates who are here today, and then they can get back to us with the answers. We are going to ask each candidate to just do a wee summary for us. And within the summary, we would like to know what plans you have of attending Prides or LGBTQ plus events over the summer, your final statement about LGBTQ rights in the UK and within your party, and if you're elected, will you be at Oban Pride on the 31st of August? The most important question of the day.
Should we go with you, Brendan?
Well, the most important question of the day, the most important answer of the day would be, if I'm in Scotland, I will be here. But if you'd like a sneak preview, then come along to Butte Pride on August the 10th, of which I am absolutely committed to being there. I believe I take centre stage sometime mid-afternoon before the festivities get all a bit wild for a man of my advancing years. But it should be a fantastic day. And if you haven't been to Oban Pride, I do advise you go. It's a fabulous day. Stay away from the man with the glitter. It takes a hell of a long time to get it in your hair. Even this much hair, it takes a hell of a long time. But you know, and you do know, that I am a huge supporter. I am a staunch ally of what you're doing, and anything I can do if re-elected, then I'm at the end of the phone. I can be that voice in the UK Parliament where appropriate, and I can also be that conduit to the Scottish Government where appropriate. I think we're very fortunate is that we have Jenny Minto as our MSP here, who is in the Scottish Government and one of the health ministers. But on a more serious point, and to end, I think that where Scotland wants to go is being thwarted economically, socially, culturally, by being part of a United Kingdom which is blocking the most even mildly progressive places that we want to be as a country. We are being stymied because we are out of the European Union. We've been taken out of the European Union, and we're thrilled, I think, to an anti-progressive sinking ship. And we need to get off. We need to get off that sinking ship, and we need to get back to the European Union. And then, as an independent member of the European Union, if we want to pass the Gender Recognition Act, we'll pass the Gender Recognition Act. If we want to outlaw conversion therapy, we'll outlaw conversion therapy. And if whatever we want to do, as our Parliament says, we will be able to do without having to go cap in hand to a Parliament in London, hoping that they will let us do it. That's not independence. That's not even devolution. We are being dictated to, from London, what we can and can't do on the most fundamental, basic issues of rights and freedoms for our people. And that is utterly, utterly unacceptable.
Yeah, I think we're probably all in agreement. We'd like to see the back of the current Conservative government, which has been holding us back. I was at Edinburgh Pride on Saturday, and I did see John Swinney in the march, and I reflected that, again, taking absolutely nothing for granted, but if Labour does win the election, I'm really, really excited about the opportunity to deliver change and to deliver a progressive agenda in the United Kingdom, and for the Labour government to work with the government in Holyrood to progress a progressive agenda, to support a progressive agenda in this country as well. I just find that so exciting. The Labour Party has always and continues to be the party of equality, respect and dignity, and the party that at its core was founded with the principle of making sure that nobody is marginalised and nobody is left behind in society. We want a much fairer society where everybody has the opportunity for a better future. I think lots of good progress has been made. I think when properly led, the UK can be such a good force for progress. Good examples of that already exist, but we have more work to do. We've touched on some of the examples that we can address in practical terms when it comes to legislation. I think the questions have been excellent tonight, shining a light to some of the important ones that we currently need to address. But I think if Labour is elected, I think in 10 years' time we can look back on a decade that again we are proud of as a country, as a UK overall, and then likewise proud in Scotland because of a Labour government that wants to work with Holyrood for a progressive agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamish.
Thank you.
Alan.
Thank you. We've had a very interesting discussion tonight. I've certainly enjoyed it. I don't think there's anything I want to add on the topics we've already discussed. There is, however, one aspect that we haven't discussed, and that's the international situation where in many countries of the world, people, LGBTQ plus people have suffer enormous levels of discrimination, and I think Britain, as an important country with a lot of influence in the world, Britain should be doing far more to spread the message throughout the world that discrimination against any group is simply not acceptable. We should be promoting human rights throughout the world, and the government should develop a comprehensive strategy for that, and there should be sanctions against countries with appalling human rights records. I would certainly be prepared to support the ban on imports from countries with absolutely appalling human rights records. So that, I think, is an important task for the next government. I mean, a lot of what Brendan said about Westminster was accurate criticism of the Conservative government. It does look as if we are going to have a Labour government. That's certainly what the polls are predicting. Not in the bag yet for Labour, but it does certainly look as if there will be change. And what I would be saying to Hamish is that if there is a Labour government, I hope that you will lobby them to introduce real change. We don't just want some progressive changes for a few years, then revert back to another Tory government elected on a small minority of the vote. I mean, what's wrong with this country is the first past the post system, because what it delivers most of the time is a Tory government elected on a small, with an overall majority, the elected dictatorship, as one Tory cabinet minister once referred to it, elected on a minority of the vote. Proportional representation would mean that would never happen again. So Hamish, if your party is given power to make constitutional change, please make that constitutional change. Tony Blair made a lot of very welcome constitutional changes, but he shied away from one of the most important of all, and that was proportional representation. So I think that is very important. Liberal Democrats will, no questions asked, change the voting system to proportional representation, so no more reactionary right-wing Tory governments. In terms of attending Pride events, very glad to attend Pride events throughout the constituency, and I've put Butte Pride on the 10th of August in my diary. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you on the 31st. A fixed date in my diary, the last Saturday in August every year is the Cowell Games. So I'm sorry, but I'm already committed to going there this year. But as long as it's not the last Saturday in August in future years, I'd certainly be very happy to come. It's a 4-year parliament at least, so I'm sure you'll forgive me if I come 3 out of 4. But I'm sorry, I've got that commitment to the Cowell Games. So finally, thank you very much, and I look forward, whether elected or not, to engaging more with Oban Pride and other Pride groups throughout the constituency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to finish off, a big thank you to Hamish Maxwell, Aaron Reid and Brendan O'Hara for joining us for our hustings at Oban Pride conversation. We have had a great discussion, and as I've said, if you do have questions, please do email them to obanpride@gmail.com and we will forward them on, because we didn't get through as many questions as we had hoped, but that is always a good sign. So thank you very much to everyone for coming in person and to everyone who joined online, and we look forward to hosting this sort of event in the future. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you all on the 31st of August.